find as an economist is that some of the people I talk to haven't really connected the dots between what's going on in the economy and what's going on in the associations, their risk of declining revenue, and how they figure out whether it's happening or not. So I wrote, some of the sharpest association leaders have been thinking about it, and it was a good reminder for them. And others were like, oh, really? So who knows? As an economist, I look at all the data. And sometimes people say, hey, what data do you look at? I look at everything. That's my job. And the business leaders I work with are looking at their company sales, their orders. They may have a sales funnel where they can see what's happening. They look at their costs. But many associations get a big lump of money from annual dues. Mm-hmm. And particularly if everybody's on the same schedule, like everybody pays their dues in January, they don't know until January whether money's coming in or not. It's a little bit better if it's staggered. They can see some trends. And also for some associations, the annual convention trade show is a big deal. And if you do one of them a year, you don't know until that registration deadline how many people are going to show up. And so you've got like two dates in the year that tell you how you're going to be, as opposed to the restaurant down the street. The owner knows at the end of every day how much money was spent there. So I think associations have a challenge. It is those sometimes members that I think association executives may be overlooking, because the association CEOs I know, they know their board members really well. They know some volunteers. There are some people who have been in the association for 20 years and are absolutely dedicated. And talking to those folks, they're going to stay in with the association and they're going to show up every convention. But what makes a difference, as an outsider, it seems to me, what makes a difference is, what about those guys who sometimes show up and sometimes don't? Mm-hmm. That's the difference between having a blockbuster year and a weak year. And there are two steps. One is monitoring, and the other is, what are your contingency plans? Let me talk about the contingency plans. When you talk to a person who's been around association management for a while, that person can come up with the list. Maybe cut staff, maybe reduce some, office expenses, some advertising, figure out which programs are not covering their own costs. But it's easy for an experienced person to come up with the list, but it helps to sort of have the assignment, come up with the list, and then start penciling it out. And what I've seen in the for-profit sector is those businesses that think through a contingency plan ahead of time have two big advantages. The first is they're faster to implement it if they've thought it through. And they've got buy-in from the people, because, if it's a larger association, the whole, senior team should be part of this planning. You need them to be bought in. And then the second thing is, not only do they implement faster, but they implement smarter, because the contingency plan can be developed saying, what are our core values? What is our long-term mission? Whereas if an association or a business finds the bank account is so thin they may not make payroll, they get in a panic, or the bank is calling in a loan, most humans do not make their best decisions when they're in a panic. At least towards the end of the Great Recession, it was probably 2009, the National Speakers Association, of which I'm a member, they asked me to give a session on adjusting topics for the recession. And I did. And the homework I found was that most of the speakers, even the CSPs and CPAs, the highly regarded ones, were offering the same topics as ever before, even though the business challenges were different. And an organization can become very fond of the things they've been doing for a long time, committed to them. But, whether it's a business or a nonprofit, it needs to be a little bit hard-headed. Are we adding value by doing this activity? And that would be true for charities as well as professional or trade associations. I think AI is going to be huge in all parts of our life. And I suggest that people start learning about it. ChatGPT just gives you a hint of what is possible, but I would suggest everybody play with it. I think of AI as a tool. I've got in my garage, I've got a table saw, which is a tool that can help me make my clumsy woodworking projects faster and more accurate. But like any tool, it can also mangle a perfectly good piece of wood, and it can cut off a thumb. It has not done that yet. I've got all 10 fingers, but I'm aware that a tool can be dangerous as well as useful. And I think that that's something the users have to learn. Yeah, there are a couple of risks. There's the risk to the whole society. And some people actually think that the AI is going to take over control of all of our of physical institutions, factories, water treatment plants, nuclear weapons, and the AI will do what it wants to do. I'm not too worried about that, but I'll admit it's a risk. At the sort of individual user level, the AI makes stuff up. So I asked it about myself and said, hey, write an article in the style of Wikipedia about the economist Bill Conerly. And it had some accurate stuff, but it also said my graduate degree was from the University of Chicago, whereas it's actually from Duke. And it had my undergraduate major wrong. And I asked it about it, and it replied, oh, this is just the kind of credentials that would be typical of a person like this. So I don't trust any factual assertions I hear from the AI. It's going to get better. And I actually, one of my sons actually works for an AI company, and we talk about that. It's going to get better, but they can't quite figure out why it comes up with what it comes up with right now.
Right, but that's kind of why you're
the issue that I think Gretchen mentioned that I did not address was, what does it mean for like labor and that sort of thing? And that's an important issue. But I've spent a lot of time on the demographics of the working age population. And I think AI is coming at a very good time, because the decade we're in, from 2020 to 2030, will have the lowest growth of the working age population since the Civil War. The lowest growth of the working age population since the Civil War.
Wow.
I didn't realize it was that far back.
Yeah. And every organization that has employees needs to think about this. How are we going to find people? The job market was tight in 2019 before the pandemic. The pandemic worsened it, but it's not going to be immediately over. It'll loosen up a little bit in recession, but only a little bit. So I think that everybody's agenda should include dealing with that. And then the AI comes along, and it's going to take a lot of routine jobs away, which people are worried about, and rightfully so. But remember, we have de-agriculturalized our economy. A couple hundred years ago, 90% of the people were farmers. And now it's just a couple of percent of the people are involved in agriculture. But we don't have 80-something% unemployment.